for our showdown preview for Thursday Night Football between the Ravens and the Dolphins, which isn't the best matchup, but it's a primetime slate. We've got some big contests to take down, so we're going to go through everything you guys need to know to take down some contests for tonight. We're going to start with an injury report. We'll talk through the stud options, value tiers, and of course our captain selections for this slate to help you guys win some money. So without further delay, let's hop right into the preview here for tonight's slate. First off, on the Ravens side of things, we have one major injury to speak of, that being Latavius Murray, who is doubtful for tonight, likely to be rolled out this afternoon. He has not practiced all week. As a result, you're looking at people like Devonta Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, perhaps even Tyson Williams getting the carries in the backfield. Sammy Watkins is also questionable. He's been limited all week. He's more than likely to suit up, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. Either way, I expect Rashad Bateman to get a little bit more snaps, a little bit more usage in this offense, and potentially people like Devin Duvernay to get some snaps if Watkins were to sit. On the other side of the ball, one major injury as well, that being to Tua Tagovailoa. He has a broken finger. He's been limited in practice all week. It is on his non-throwing hand, and he's already been announced as active. So if he's not going to be starting, he will be backing up Jacoby Brissett. But I do expect him to start here. Again, it's not on his throwing hand, so as long as he's able to, deal with the pain and whatnot, he should be able to get out there. In terms of guys on IR, we have Will Fuller and Devontae Parker, who will be staying on the IR. Somebody who's active, who has not been for a few weeks now, is going to be Preston Williams. He's been out due to disciplinary reasons. We actually have not been given a reason for that, but he's going to be active. Who knows how much playing time he's going to get, but he's only $200 on this slate, so a true X factor. We'll get to that with the value plays, though. In terms of a game script, relatively middling scoring games, 46.5 point over-under. It's not going to scream shootout. It's also not going to scream defensive matchup either. In terms of a script, we have the Ravens favored by 7.5 points, which shows that they're clear favorites here, which I tend to agree with. Obviously have a very solid offense, very good run game. Defense has also been coming into its own as well. So, and while they've been prone to some deep plays, they've been torched, especially Marlon Humphrey. I mean, that guy was a top cornerback for quite some time and hasn't looked like it at all this year. I think there is a potential shootout chance here. I mean, the Dolphins have been really efficient on the offensive side of the ball, especially when you compare it to their production last year, and their defense has been extremely susceptible to shootouts as well. So I do think that there is some fantasy potential here. I do think that there is shootout potential as well, and that you'll see that reflected in my picks. So first and foremost for the Ravens, at number 3, we have Rashad Bateman at $5,800, coming in with relatively low ownership. Also, not going to be popping off the board in terms of projection, just have him at 12.8 points right now, but he's steadily seen an increase in his usage ever since he got into the offense. Was obviously injured to begin the year, so when they were able to activate him off IR, he slowly but surely become more comfortable within this offense. So in general, I like him even more if Sammy Watkins is out. So I mentioned that before, he's questionable. He is expected to suit up, but even if Watkins plays, you're looking at a guy at low ownership who has big play potential. He's also been targeted a lot as well. So I think you could do a whole lot worse there than Bateman at number 3. Next up, we have Mark Andrews at $8,800. He's obviously a little bit more expensive than we'd like to see him, but pretty much everyone on the slate is a little bit overpriced. We've seen that from Draftkings these last 2 or 3 primetime slates. I don't know what it is. Maybe they changed something in their algorithm, but essentially the value plays are extremely underpriced and all these stud tier options are extremely overpriced. So we'll get to the value options, but we're not going to have to worry about that. We have some guys at $200, $400, even $600 that are legitimate plays on this slate. So paying up for Mark Andrews isn't an issue. We're really just looking for raw points. And again, this team's favored. They have been passing the ball an absolute ton this year over in Baltimore. And I think Mark Andrews could have another big game in him. And lastly, this is the no-brainer pick. We're not going to spend much time here at all. It's Lamar Jackson. Even at $13,800, he's going to be a lock for me either at the flex spot or captain. I'm probably going to have him in at least half my lineups at captain, so I guess I'll technically be under the field there in terms of his flex ownership, but somebody I'm extremely bullish on. Obviously, he brings a ton of rushing upside to the table. They've been passing the ball a ton in Baltimore, and overall, I think he's a must-play, so we'll leave it there. I think you guys knew to play Lamar Jackson here. Next up for the Dolphins, we have Tua or Brissett. Whoever ends up starting for this team, I do think is going to be a solid option here. It's either $10,200 or $9,800. Either way, I do expect right around 50% ownership. That number right there and the projection obviously are for Tua. Brissett would come in a little bit higher owned in my opinion, just because he's a little bit cheaper. Also brings some rushing upside to the table. Also would project slightly higher, probably for like 17.2 points. Overall though, I think that this game has some shootout potential. That's why I think that targeting Tua or Brissett is probably a good idea. He's not going to be in every lineup that I have. I'm probably not going to play either of them at captain either, but they're definitely going to be people that I have about 60, 65% of my lineups. Either match the field or get a slight amount of leverage on it. I don't think he's going to make or break this slate. I could very well see him end up being in the optimal lineup. In terms of my simulations, he's in the optimal lineup about 70% of the time. But at the same time, his ceiling is capped at around 23 fantasy points, which isn't what you're looking for at $10,000 on this showdown slate. So not going to be using him at captain, either option there, but a very solid option at the flex. Next up, we have Mike Gesicki at $7,400. He's one of the few stud options in this slate that's not overpriced. So if you need to save a little bit of salary, perhaps you're trying to fit in both quarterbacks and you have Lamar at captain, Gesicki might be the guy for that type of a build. He's only 19.8% owned. He projects nicely there at 13.7 points. Obviously, is a little bit touchdown dependent. He's not going to get you a ton of yards. Has been getting a lot more targets this year, so he's getting a lot more PPR production. But overall, I like him there, but not as much as my number one target, who's going to be Jaylen Waddle at $8,200. He's 28.3% owned, so definitely garnering some ownership there, but projecting out nicely at 16.2 points. He's somebody who gets a lot of PPR upside, particularly with Devontae Parker out of the lineup, as well as Will Fuller. Both those guys are going to get a ton of targets when they're inserted back into the offense. But as of right now, Waddle's the 1A option. He's the guy who's getting all of the targets. He's getting all the looks on third down. And he's a really good possession wide receiver. He makes a lot of catches. He's able to catch the balls in traffic, over the middle, everything like that, which gives him plenty of upside as a PPR wide receiver. So at $8,200, I think you could do a whole lot worse than Waddle on the slate. And now for the value plays. First off, we have Albert Wilson at $400. Again, all the value plays here are going to be extremely underpriced. There's some guys in the $2,000 to $4,000 range that I think are all right plays, but all three of these guys project higher than those people. So unless you're looking to get extremely unique, those people will be low owned. These are going to be the people that I'm targeting for my lineups. So Albert Wilson could see extended usage if Preston Williams is not inserted back into the lineup. We're expecting that to happen though, but again, a contingency plan just in case. Albert Wilson would be serving as the number 2 or perhaps even number 3 wide receiver under those circumstances. So at 4.1% ownership, I think it's a little bit too low for him. I'm projecting for 5.5 fantasy points. And again, when we're dealing with somebody this far down the board, they don't have to do much to pay off. And he's somebody who got 2 targets last week. If he cashes in both of those targets for catches and one of them is a decent gain, that's enough to get there. And 5.5 fantasy points, believe it or not, at $400 would be enough to pay off that price tag. Next up, we have Salvon Ahmed at $800. Obviously a little bit more expensive, but still sub 1K. But somebody we know is going to get targets. We know that Malcolm Brown's not going to be a targeted in this game. We know that they've been using Myles Gaskin a little bit more of late. But this is a team that uses like a 60-40 share between the running backs. They almost never go to like a 70-30 or obviously a full workhorse back or anything like that. So Ahmed in this potential shootout could get 10, maybe even 15 touches. And at $800, it's pretty obvious that he could pay off that price tag. So I definitely like him on the slate. With the X factor here, the guy that's either going to win somebody $1 million or he's going to play no snaps. We have no idea. There's been absolutely no coverage on this. Anytime you've had Flores asked about it, he hasn't really given you an answer. That's Preston Williams at $200. Again, he hasn't been active the last 2 weeks. He's been a healthy scratch due to disciplinary reasons. And there hasn't been a reason given. We have no idea what's going on with him. Perhaps it's, defiance at practice. Maybe he's a cancer in the locker room. Whatever it is, he's active here. They need him. They're not going to have Will Fuller. They're not going to have Preston Williams. They're hurting on offense. They need a win. They need to stay in this division. So overall, I do expect him to get playing time. He's just too good not to be out there. The clear number 1 wide receiver, if he starts, in my opinion, I do think that he's a better target than somebody like a Jaylen Waddle. I think Tua knows that as well. So it's going to be chalky, especially if we get news that he's returning to number 1 wide receiver duties. So at 31.5% ownership, I'm willing to eat the chalk there. This is somebody who, if we get positive news on before the game, especially that he'll be playing most of the snaps, that kind of thing, I'll lock button him. He's $200, guys. All he has to do is get you 4 or 5 fantasy points, and that's enough to pay it off. And this guy has legit 15, 20 point upside. So one of the best value options I can honestly remember from a standpoint, especially if we get that kind of news beforehand. Next, we'll finish up with our captain options for this slate. First off, we have Mark Andrews at $13,200. Not going to be extremely high owned. A lot of it has to do with our option here at number 1. And I don't want to take too much time for number 3 and number 2 because I'm probably locking Lamar Jackson at captain. But Mark Andrews, somebody if you want to get a little bit different, you can go to. He obviously had that massive primetime game earlier on this year where he ended up being the optimal captain. And while I think that's possible, again, we've seen it before, it's not very likely. That is an outlier performance, so I'm not going to be chasing that, as some of the field obviously will. Next up, we have Jaylen Waddle at $12,300. Again, I really like that PPR upside. I don't expect him to be the optimal captain, though. That's why we're just skipping the number 1, guys. Lamar Jackson, anytime he's on a slate, you can almost argue that he's worth locking every single time. First week of the year, I forget exactly who they were playing, but I dropped the stat, and this has only changed once. It was only that one slate where this didn't happen, where anytime he's been on a showdown slate for a primetime game, he's been the optimal captain. Every single time but once. So at this point, it's been 10 of 11 performances. Ended up being the optimal captain once more this year. But other than that time that Mark Andrews went out there and absolutely stole the show, he's been the optimal captain every single time, which is extremely notable. I mean, obviously, he's $20,000 this week, but that's well warranted. This is somebody who's legit 35 point upside. And with some of the value plays that we have on the slate, that's not an issue. I mean, plug in Ahmed and Williams, and you can essentially play whoever the heck you want. You can play both quarterbacks. You can go to whatever stud options at wide receiver you want, and probably still leave salary on the table. So again, the price tag is going to look a little bit glaring, but isn't an issue with some of the value options that we have. Perhaps that's why the value options are priced where they are. Draftkings is changing up their algorithm, obviously, with their pricing, and it's creating an interesting level of chalk. I think it's making ownership a little bit more concentrated than it needs to be. So perhaps they'll see that with the type of results, the type of ownership that's, created as a result of this type of pricing, and change that. But until then, we're probably going to have to lock Lamar at captain, take some of those value options, be a little bit aggressive with them, and scattershot the middle, which is usually the opposite of the strategy here on the channel. Typically, we're looking to be a little bit more aggressive up top, kind of scattershot down low, but we're not going to have that liberty this week. So a little bit of a different slate for you guys, but wanted to go ahead and get you guys this preview. That's all for this Thursday night football preview. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you have as your favorite captain play for this slate. Obviously for me, I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's Lamar Jackson. So perhaps you agree with me, or perhaps you have somebody completely off the board I'm not thinking of. So go ahead and let me know who you've got. I always love to hear from you guys. And as always, I appreciate all of your support here on the channel, an absolute ton. If you guys haven't already liked and subscribed, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. We're going to have a full slate of NFL content coming out this week. NBA content coming soon, a little bit of a Freudian slip there. Either way, we're going to have main slate content in terms of core picks, values, fades, sleepers. We'll have our weekly live stream on Sunday morning. That's at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. And of course, we're going to have all of our Showdown content. So for Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, got you guys covered all over the place. So again, appreciate you guys stopping by. Good luck with all of your lineups for tonight.